My name is Rachel Porter, and when I think back to how my life unfolded after marrying into the Porter family, I realize that sometimes unexpected relationships are the ones that shape us most. I married Daniel Porter when I was 27. He was kind, steady, and one of those men who never rushed to make decisions, but once he did, he committed fully. Daniel came from a close-knit family, but it wasn't the kind of close that meant constant chatter and loud gatherings. His family was more reserved, private, and sometimes even quiet to the point of awkwardness. His father had passed away a few years before we met, and that left his mother, Margaret Porter, living alone in the big house on the outskirts of town. When Daniel first took me to meet Margaret, I could tell immediately she was a woman who carried both pride and loneliness on her shoulders. She greeted me warmly enough, but there was something in her eyes that suggested she was still adjusting to her new reality of being without her husband. I noticed how she lingered when she spoke to us, how she seemed reluctant to let Daniel leave that evening. Later in the car, Daniel explained that since his father's passing, Margaret had struggled with being alone in the big house. He felt guilty not being able to spend more time with her, but his work and our new life together kept him busy. After Daniel and I got married, Margaret became a quiet presence in our lives. She'd call every now and then, often with simple questions that didn't really require answers. "Do you know if the post office still closes at 5?" she'd ask. Or, "Did you hear if the church is having the rummage sale this year?" At first, I thought she was simply forgetful, but it didn't take me long to realize these were excuses to hear another voice. As the weeks passed, Daniel asked me if I'd mind checking in on her once or twice a week. His job required him to travel, sometimes overnight, and he didn't want his mother to feel abandoned. I agreed, though I'll admit I was hesitant at first. The idea of spending long afternoons with my mother-in-law felt intimidating. What if she didn't like me? What if we ran out of things to say? But what surprised me was how quickly our visits began to feel natural. Margaret had this way of filling a room with stories once she got started. At first, she told me little things about Daniel's childhood, how he refused to eat broccoli, how he built forts out of couch cushions, how he once rescued a stray dog and begged to keep it. Later, she began to open up about her own life, about meeting her husband Robert at a county fair, about the way he proposed under an oak tree on her family's farm, and about the struggles they faced building their lives together. I would sit at her kitchen table, sipping tea, listening as the hours slipped by. Slowly, I realized that Margaret didn't just dislike being alone. She feared it. The silence of the house pressed down on her, and she sought connection wherever she could find it. One afternoon, as rain tapped against the windows, she admitted, "Rachel, I never thought I'd be this kind of woman. I was strong when Robert was alive. I could handle anything. But now, when the evenings come, I feel like the walls are closing in." I felt a pang in my chest because, truthfully, I understood. Though I was married to Daniel, his frequent work trips left me spending many nights by myself. I wasn't used to that kind of solitude, and sometimes it weighed on me more than I wanted to admit. I told Margaret as much, and for the first time, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Then we'll keep each other company," she said with a small smile. From then on, our relationship deepened. When Daniel was away, I often stayed over at Margaret's house. We'd cook dinner together, trying new recipes neither of us had mastered. Sometimes we'd sit on the porch with blankets, listening to the crickets and watching the moon climb the sky. Other nights, we'd play card games or work on puzzles that sprawled across her dining room table. Margaret became less of a mother-in-law and more of a companion, someone who understood the ache of empty rooms and the relief of shared laughter. But it wasn't always easy. There were moments when her grief surfaced in unexpected ways. I remember one evening when she showed me her late husband's study. The room was just as he had left it, books on the shelves, papers on the desk, even his old glasses resting on a stack of magazines. "I can't bring myself to change anything," she whispered. "If I do, it's like admitting he's really gone." I didn't know what to say, so I simply stood beside her, letting her lean on me as tears rolled down her cheeks. That night, as I lay awake in the guest bedroom, I thought about how fragile we all become when the people we love most are taken from us. Over time, Daniel noticed the bond between his mother and me. He was grateful, but also a little surprised. "I didn't expect you two to get along so well," he admitted one weekend when he was home. "You're actually closer to her than I am these days." I smiled and told him it wasn't about replacing him or stepping into a role. It was about filling a space that both Margaret and I needed filled. There was one winter in particular that tested us both. Daniel had to leave for an extended project out of state, and the snowstorms rolled in hard and fast. Roads closed, power flickered, and isolation became more than just an emotion. It was a reality. Margaret insisted I stay with her rather than face the storms alone in our smaller house. For nearly a month, we shared her home. We shoveled snow together, lit candles when the electricity went out, and cooked meals on her old gas stove. At night, when the wind howled, we sat wrapped in blankets, telling stories to drown out the storm. That month taught me more about resilience and companionship than any other time in my life. Margaret and I were not without our disagreements, of course. She had her ways of doing things, and I had mine. Sometimes she'd criticize how I folded laundry or question the meals I cooked. But even those small clashes became opportunities for us to learn about one another. I began to see her not just as Daniel's mother, but as a woman who had lived a full life, who had dreams and flaws, joys and regrets. Years later, when Daniel and I had children, Margaret became a doting grandmother. But our bond never faded. She would often say, "Rachel, you saved me from loneliness." And I would quietly think, "You saved me too." Because in truth, those years of companionship gave me strength during the nights when Daniel was away, and later, during the challenges of raising children and navigating life's unpredictable turns. Looking back now, I realize the title of my story is simple but true. My mother-in-law didn't like being alone, and neither did I. In each other, we found the company we craved, the comfort we missed, and the reminder that sometimes family isn't just built by marriage, it's built by the hours spent together, filling the silence with warmth.